The 1850s were a dynamic time for Toronto and its black residents. Free blacks and Canadian slaves had been living in York, as it was called at the time, since the late 1700s, and freed or runaway American slaves had been settling in many parts of southern Ontario since the 1830s. In America, the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850 empowered slave owners and legal authorities to capture anyone alleged to be a fugitive. So even more former slaves fled to southern Ontario. Those who came to Toronto joined the black community and found a social climate that allowed them to prosper. Many were tradespeople and business owners. Thomas Carey, a free black originally from Virginia, owned Toronto's first ice houses, using water from mill ponds in Yorkville north of Bloor Street. This site in Cabbagetown was the home of Thornton Blackburn, an escaped slave from Kentucky who fled with his wife to Canada in 1833. Blackburn's owner tried to have him returned, but Ontario's Lieutenant Governor refused to extradite him to the U.S. That case altered Canadian extradition law. While working as a waiter at Osgoode Hall, Blackburn noted that Toronto lacked public transportation on its muddy roads, so he arranged the construction of a horse-drawn cab based on vehicles being used in Montreal. The Yellow City Taxi was the first of its kind in Toronto. Blackburn played an important role helping freedom seekers and promoting anti-slavery. He is buried in Toronto's Necropolis Cemetery. Baldwin Village, located west of downtown Toronto, is now a commercial enclave. Here, former homes have been converted to restaurants and small shops selling arts, crafts, and curios. And some of the buildings have ties to the city's early black history, too. The First Baptist Church is the oldest black institution in the city. It was founded in 1826 when escaped slaves met on the shores of Toronto Bay and in each other's homes to worship. By 1841, as members grew, they erected their first church on the corner of Queen and Victoria Streets, then another on the northeast corner of University Avenue and Edward Street in 1905. They moved to this Darcy Street site in 1955. One block to the north stands the former home of distinguished Torontonian George Brown. In the 1850s, the renowned journalist, politician, and father of the Confederation used his paper, the Toronto Globe, now called the Globe and Mail, to promote black rights and to attack slavery. Eventually, Brown became a founding member of the Anti-Slavery Society of Canada, whose main function was assisting former slaves with education, employment, and advancing their well-being. This is the Toronto Courthouse on Centre Street. On this site just north of Osgoode Hall, in an area then called Macaulay Town, African Methodists pooled their funds to build a small church in 1845. The African Methodist Episcopal Church was a meeting place for the black community, who welcomed and arranged housing and jobs for families seeking freedom via the Underground Railroad. Eventually, it was replaced by this brick structure. This neighborhood formed part of St. John's Ward, the area bounded by College Street, Yonge Street, Queen Street, and University Avenue. In the 1830s, Thornton Blackburn, himself a former slave from Kentucky, began buying several properties in the neighborhood, which he provided to fugitive slaves at low rents. So by the 1850s, many black families had settled in the ward. Toronto's King Street is a bustling east-west commercial thoroughfare with dozens of stores, design shops, trendy restaurants, and condo developments. Back in 1851, there were 34 black tradespeople and business owners in Toronto, and many of their businesses were located along King Street, the city's main commercial, cultural, and ceremonial thoroughfare at that time. The Carey brothers, free blacks originally from Virginia, opened several popular barbershops, including one at 88 King Street West. St. Lawrence Hall at the corner of King and Jarvis Streets opened in 1851 and was one of Toronto's most important public buildings. At the Convention of Colored People here in September 1851, participants, including Mary Ann Shadd, the first black female publisher in Canada, condemned slavery and appealed to black Americans, both free and enslaved, to settle in Canada. The Anti-Slavery Society of Canada also held its meetings at St. Lawrence Hall, and it became a major center of abolitionist lectures and fundraising activities. Samuel Ward, who gave lectures across Ontario, said,
Toronto is somewhat peculiar in many ways. Anti-slavery is more popular here than in any city I know. The public mind literally thirsts for the truth, and honest listeners and anxious inquirers will travel many miles, crowd our country chapels, and remain for hours, eagerly and patiently seeking the light.
King Street continues to play a major role in the life of the city. There will always be connections between the street and the black community who made Toronto their last stop on the Underground Railroad.